So welcome again. I'm Nancy Schertzing. I am the Director of Restorative Approaches in Education for the Center for Dispute Resolution here at the University of Maryland, Francis King Carey School of Law. And I always tell people that, yes, that does fit on a business card, but it's really, really teeny writing. And my work here at CDRUM focuses on not only training in restorative approaches, but also advocating for really restorative approaches to be integrated into all levels of the school environment as much as possible. And one of the areas that it's been my great privilege to work in is a program called ERIN Talk, which is a sexual violence prevention and from a health standpoint, and we use restorative. It's founded in restorative approaches. We use the circle process exclusively when we go into schools and engage students in this program, which we'll talk about a little bit more in just a second. But first, I want to share with you some of the background about the ERIN Talk. It's a story that actually sometimes it kind of chokes me up a little bit because the ERIN Talk is a tribute to Erin Levitas, who was preparing to become a law student here at Maryland Carey Law. And she had a cancer diagnosis, which ended up being a terminal cancer. And as she and her family were on that end of life journey, there were a number of obviously things that came up, but one of the things that was very troubling and very moving is that Erin had experienced a sexual assault in her earlier life. And that experience was haunting enough to her that her family decided that they really wanted to help other people avoid being affected, being haunted in that same way. And so Erin's family reached out to the Maryland Carey Law, and we developed the partnership called, or they developed the partnership called ERIN Talk, and which is designed to work with people at a very young age to help them form healthy attitudes, behaviors toward sexual activity. And what we are about actually is the ERIN Talk program is that we go into middle schools and we have been focused mostly here in the Baltimore area, but we also have engaged with high school students. We also have branches or satellite experiences in other parts of the country where they are also delivering this content. And it is a series of 6 lessons, and you can see here with the bullets that what we start with is healthy communication. We talk about online safety, and we talk about boundaries. This is one of my favorite lessons that we do in the schools. We look at digital boundaries, which is technology, emotional boundaries, physical, and then we talk about sexual boundaries. And that unit, the sexual boundaries unit, which is only 1/4 of this lesson, leads us into consent, which is a very powerful conversation. For me, it's a great privilege to be able to be a part of that, those conversations and exploring the different things about consent. Then we talk about gender roles and expectations and becoming an upstander. And sometimes we finish with an art project. We do a 7th week where we do an art project as kind of a bringing everything together. So it is that this is what we're going to talk about here in our time together with my 2 esteemed, and I said very dear colleagues, Quince Hopkins, who is a professor here at Maryland Carey Law. She's been working in restorative justice and gender-based violence issues for over 2 decades now. 7 years working with youth and sexual violence prevention using restorative approaches. And then we have also my colleague, Emily Ames Messenger, who is a social worker, who is a former teacher here in Baltimore City. She is not quite as seasoned as Quint and I, so she only has nearly 2 decades of working in teaching in schools and school climate and culture, and then has extensive experience in educational policy. So these are my my colleagues, my go-tos when I have questions about sexual violence issues, or in Emily's case, emotions wheels and things that that you don't usually think about in a law school. She's my go-to for that. So I will go ahead and let them talk for themselves a little bit here. And Quince, would you like to come off mute and share with us what led you to develop ERIN Talk here at the University of Maryland, Baltimore?
Yeah, I'd love to. And thank you everyone for being here. It's really exciting to get a chance to talk about the work that we're doing. My introduction to this work started really, really early on in my practice. I became a lawyer in the early 90s. Like ERIN, I came to the work as a survivor wanting to do work to respond to sexual violence, fighting that good fight. But I will say that my frustration with the legal system as the primary response to gender-based violence started early. Started early. When I was a lawyer with the House of Ruth here in Maryland, I saw on a daily basis the legal system's failure in the face of gender-based violence to do a lot other than basically a Band-Aid, and not a very good Band-Aid at that. I first thought maybe what we just need is more lawyers. So that led me to go into law teaching. I was a clinical law professor at University of Arizona, where I started a gender violence clinic, and that was yay, more budding lawyers to kind of fight the good fight. But over the course of those 10 years that I did that work, we certainly increased the availability of legal services for survivors. But other than that, nothing was changing in terms of reducing sexual violence out in the world. We still had the same number of clients coming through the door. And it became clear over those years that not only was the legal system unpredictable for the survivors who were coming to it, that they might get a bit of a help with what they were needing help with, but it was not changing what had happened to them, and was not necessarily healing in that kind of a way. It was actually wrenching, traumatic, often destructive and unpredictable. And there's actually a term for this. It's called critogenic harm. It means law-caused harm. So the legal system, not just in the area of sexual violence, but certainly in the area of sexual violence and other gender-based violence, the legal system actually can cause harm. It can increase or cause post-traumatic stress disorder and any number of mental health challenges. So legal system was not the silver bullet that one might hope for. So what we're seeing, it wasn't fixing much of anything, and it was actually causing harm to survivors who were coming to it. So at that point, I really shifted my focus to the whys of sexual violence. Why is this happening? We're just responding to it. Why is it happening in the first place? And what can we do about it? What can we do in a way that's going to change that prevalence? And I was fortunate in the early 2000s to connect with Mary Koss, who was at the University of Arizona College of Public Health, and she had been at the work longer than I had as a researcher, sexual violence researcher, and but her thinking had progressed to where mine was, which was we need a better way. We need a better way than the legal system, the customary or traditional legal system, to respond to this. And she was developing a program called the Restore program, which I joined early on and helped form some of the theory behind it. It was a CDC-funded program for 5 years where we were using restorative justice conferencing in response to sexual violence between acquaintances, adult acquaintances in particular. And that was super exciting to be working on. We did have outcomes that came out of that program that were really promising. It remains the gold standard for the work of restorative justice responses to sexual violence between adults. We had not only great satisfaction of the people who participated in it, but also, sort of most importantly, we saw reductions in PTSD in survivors who came through that program. But it was still the same thing, right? We're still responding to things that had happened as opposed to changing whether it was happening in the first place. And for many of us, and certainly for survivors, we would certainly rather it not happen in the first place. And so when the opportunity arose at the University of Maryland to develop a program that used restorative practices as a prevention tool, I jumped at the chance. And that's sort of the seeing other programs around the country and around the world doing responsive programs in Australia, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Ireland, all over the place doing responsive programs. There were not really any programs out there doing a proactive effort to reduce the occurrence of sexual violence in the first place using restorative practices. So that was super exciting to be brought in to do that program.
Thank you very much. And I love some of the stories, some of the research that you share with us, Quince, about the work that Mary Koss has done. And it's very, it's a little bit mind-boggling how our attitudes have changed in such a, it's what's mind-boggling is how our attitudes were so backward before. And thank you to you and to the work that you've been doing. I think that's a
Okay.
testament. So
Yeah, and to talk very cost for those who are familiar with the 1 in 4 college women will experience sexual violence. That's Mary Koss's work. I mean, she's been at this work for a long time. And one story I've shared with Nancy that is gives us a sign of where we have moved, right? The distance we have moved is early on in her career. She was working. Putting together research proposals, and one of her colleagues, an older, more senior male colleague, came to her and said, "I'd really like you to work on this project I've got, this putting a grant in to study whether breast size has an impact on people's views of whether a person is rapeable." That was the level at which things were in the 1980s, that was seen as somehow a reasonable question to ask. And so, yes, we have moved. We've shifted, but the numbers haven't changed. That's what's sort of interesting, why prevention is so important.
yeah, yeah, thank you so much. All right, Emily, to you, what benefits do you see of this program in schools?
Yeah. So I think starting a little bit about how I got there and then why I am so excited about ERIN Talk and to be partnering at this program. So as a teacher and a community school coordinator in a school-based, a social worker in a school, um, just you would have students that have big, complicated questions. And as an adult working in those buildings, the jumping into those conversations can sometimes feel very intimidating. And so I think the thing that I really appreciate about ERIN Talk is because it is based in a restorative framework, and that it's not a sit and get. It's not, this is what you need to know, this is the content. And while certainly students and participants and the facilitators are able to work together to learn things that students need to know in order to be safe and make wise, informed decisions, that it's really driven through the restorative practice, that students and participants are able to kind of reflect, think about their own eyes when we talked about kind of biases and the own things that people bring to that work as facilitators and as students, that people are able to reflect on what they are and make decisions before that they're put into a position where they could make unsafe decisions. I think a lot of this too, also as I'm a parent of young kids and thinking about language around consent and boundaries, that starts early in the same way that you wouldn't assume that someone knows math or knows how to read, that it has to be taught, and that looking at how beginning in middle school and at a different level in different contexts, even with my own kids who are in early elementary school, how are you building language and vocabulary and empowering students to make choices that they really have power over their own bodies and their own relational decisions. And so that ERIN Talk kind of works to give that in a way that's guided and responded to the questions and the needs of students rather than what the adults think they need to know, although we get some of that as well.
And I think add to that, one of the things that I think is helpful to understand about the program is there's a reason we're working in middle school. And there's a reason, based on the research, that restorative practices are so promising and hopeful that makes it different from other consent education programs. There are a lot of really good programs out there doing good work, but what we are leaning into is what we know about restorative practices and restorative circles more generally as something that relates to the risk and protective factors for engaging in sexual behavior, sexually harmful behavior, or experiencing it. So we work in middle school because there's something called the bullying to sexual assault pathway. Well documented in the research that behaviors that start out as bullying in the early elementary school years can morph into homophobic bullying in middle school, and homophobic bullying behaviors also can morph into or be parallel with sexual harassment behaviors that also tends to be highest in middle school. And those kinds of behaviors can be predictive of experiencing or engaging in more serious sexual violence, sexual assault, and rape in high school and college. So middle school is the sweet spot. It's when sexual harassment is at its highest, homophobic bullying is at its highest. It actually tends to drop off a little bit in high school. The rates of sexual harassment experiences for middle schoolers are at the 50% mark for girls, and almost that for boys as well. And both boys do it and girls do it. So it's so prevalent, and we tend to not know as adults in the room whether we should respond to things. Kids don't know whether we should be responding to it or not. Oh, that's just what, what people do. Don't, have a thick skin, all of those kinds of things. But what we know is because they are predictors of potential more serious harm, and that they in and of themselves can cause stress, mental stress, and other kinds of stress for young people. It's important to work in that way. In terms of the circles, in terms of working in circles, the thing that is different about this program is not only that we are linked to the restorative philosophy about the values of equality and respect, and everyone has a voice. The process itself has young people sitting across from each other, and that's really critical. It's when you see it happen in the circle, it's not magic, but it feels like magic sometimes, where you see their faces and see them get quiet, or even watching each other talk about some of these really intense kinds of things that they talk about. And what we know is we're going to walk out of the room, and they're going to be the ones that are talking to each other. We don't want them talking to us. We want them to talk to each other. And so they build those skills to communicate with their peers and to read those verbal and nonverbal cues. And one of the really exciting pieces is with the research around restorative circles in general as a promising practice for building empathy, is that empathy is a strong protective factor against experiencing or engaging in sexual violence. And if we use restorative circles, and that helps us build those empathy skills, that will not only be good for them in the big picture of their lives, but will also be particularly helpful when it comes to protecting against sexual harm.
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm going to move to our next question here, which is Quincy, we're asking you to talk about our partnership with the School of Social Work, the law school, and Emily, you can also mention it. One thing that I didn't mention also, though, is that we engage School of Social Work graduate students and law students to deliver these ERIN talk sessions. So it's not always just us. In fact, it's rarely us delivering the content. We are there in the schools with our graduate students who are closer in age and have a different way of relating to the scholars as well. So Quince, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So not only do we have law students and graduate social work students as our facilitators that we train up every year, we learn a lot from them, by the way. Everybody, every program we work with, every school we work with, all the kids we work with, and with the graduate students we work with, we learn and morph the program from everything that we learn. But we also our program is research-based, and that means sort of two different things. It means that it's building on the content, and the method that we use is built on what we know from the research, but we also are evaluating the program's effectiveness. And so bringing in Dr. Laurie Graham from the School of Social Work, April Cavaletto's PhD student there, as part of our team has been invaluable to both the setting up an evaluation of the program, also input into the program itself, and also So our ERIN Talk itself is part of a larger trio of programs. We have a teacher or a youth serving adults facing program called Teacher Talk that was developed by Dr. Graham and that has now been fleshed out into an free online program for teachers and other youth serving adults. And we also have a program that focuses on parents. And all of these are research informed. So that's been a huge boon to our work to have that expertise as part of our team. We've also brought in other folks in terms of we worked with Jimmy Boyd Keys, who is an expert in gender violence and racial equity, and she's had a review of our program and is part of our Teacher Talk program, very actively part of the Teacher Talk program. If you were to participate in that, you'd see her. She's a major part of the work that we've developed, the program that we've developed, and we also have had folks in the research area, expertise in LGBTQ youth, working in gender-based violence and the specific unique needs and concerns for that part of the community. So it's been a great partnership and continues to be a great partnership with the School of Social Work as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about that partnership and then also if there are other benefits that you haven't listed before? I will warn you, I told you the time goes really fast. We're down to about 5 minutes. So
We'll be quick.
thank
I think some of this goes back to the fact that part of the beauty of that it is a restorative intervention is that it's very based in the place. And that the benefit is that for most of our models, both the facilitator, so while it is a structured, manualized curriculum that walks you through specific questions and provides kind of all of the key teaching points that need to be covered in that content, kind of how that conversation is navigated is based on the place in the community and the kids, so that ultimately it will always be responsive to the questions and the needs of the students. And so with that, kind of like what partnership would look like is a lot of different things based on the needs of the school. So we have some schools that partner with us and that we come in with a team of law students and a senior facilitator or a local volunteer who's been trained and delivered the curriculum. And that's a space where the adult from that partner organization is there and is part of the circle and is participating and sharing their own experiences. But that's part where you have kind of the guest and the novelty that is coming in and facilitating from the outside. We also have school sites that are looking to bring that capacity in-house, and they're saying this is part of our organizational culture. We want to build this in, that every seventh grader or every X, Y, and Z student participates this. This is how we get our students to have a shared belief and value system around relationships and sexual violence. And how do we kind of treat each other respectfully with consent and clear boundaries. But so that we actually then partner, so we at the University of Maryland Law and at ELF partner with schools to help train them. Going through that first time, realizing that first jump off the cliff can be a little bit scary, but walking through that process and coaching them to be able to deliver that independently going forward. And honestly, then ultimately train up other folks within their school community to help deliver that content because that's cost effective, it's flexible, and that way they have autonomy within their school to kind of deliver the model with fidelity, but in a way that remains relevant. And then finally, for those folks who might not even be in the Baltimore, D.C. area, that we do have 2 sites that are remote currently and are using the manualized curriculum. And then we do virtual coaching to make sure that it is being offered with fidelity, but also to be able to have the advantages of someone to help you troubleshoot, help them to problem solve, kind of what's happening with your group dynamics, as well as specific needs and questions about content follow-up. But so the goal is that in partnering with ERIN Talk, it's easy, it's flexible, it meets the needs of your school, but also that these are conversations that are hard to have and hard to have well. And that's something that we as a team of facilitators and with student facilitators troubleshoot on an ongoing basis. This still isn't working. How do we change this? How do we make this better? And that you have the benefit of that community as restorative practitioners, that we are always working of how can we build those relationships and connections between kids and the facilitators and students and each other so that we are all able to have a better, stronger expectations of each other to have safe relationships, and change kind of behaviors and beliefs and attitudes around sexual violence.
What a lovely way to end, to wrap up our conversation. That was beautiful. Thank you. I did want to include this QR code if you're interested in learning more about the ERIN Talk program or the ERIN Levitas program. This will take you to a website that shares with you just some basics about ERIN Talk that perhaps we haven't been able to cover in our short time together. And that I'll put that back up on the screen in just a second, but you all know that I end with a shameless plug for our next Mighty Midday webinar, and that will be on August 19th. We're going to talk with some people who have been a part of introducing restorative approaches and really fostering restorative approaches in schools here in Maryland. And we'll kind of look back and look to the present and then maybe look ahead a little bit even. We'll see. But I hope you'll join us on August 19th for another noon webinar. And here's some contact information if you'd like. Again, the QR code for ERIN Talk. If you would like to follow up with me, please feel free to email me at any time. And we are very, very grateful that you are here. Lisa, do we have any chats that could be addressed real quickly?
No, we don't have anything in the chat. No questions at the chat.
All right. Well, y'all, we are just delighted that you have joined us for this lunchtime period. Please do feel free to follow up with us at any point. And I believe that it is 12:29, almost 12:30 right now. So we'll give you back the rest of your day. And thank you again for joining us.